Hey, this is Wes in Productions, and today I'm doing a quick guide on how to clean up AI vocals. The first step would be to choose good source material. So you'd want to pick a track for your remix that has the vocals standing out pretty far in the mix. The rule of thumb is the easier it is for your ears to pick out the vocal in the mix, the easier it'll be for the AI to do it cleanly. So a track that has a muddy mid-range with the vocal tucked in pretty far will give much worse results when AI separated, whereas a track that's much more open and clear and has the vocal sitting far over the rest of the mix will separate much more cleanly. And then with whatever tool you choose to use to separate the vocal, having the source material be as high quality as possible will help. So doing a YouTube MP3 and then separating out the vocal will often yield a pretty low quality rip, because once it's taken off YouTube, it's already in pretty low quality, and then as it goes through the processing with the vocal removal, that'll mess with it even more. So if possible, I would buy the track off Beatport or get a high quality WAV download of it. And then once you have those criteria met and you have a decent sounding separated vocal, then we can take it here into Ableton and start working with it. And one rule that I have with AI vocals is once they've already been processed a bunch by the vocal separation, I don't do any further warping on them. Or at least I don't do any warping in the complex or complex pro modes, because those modes, they're also spectral processing, much like the vocal separation. And I've already messed with the quality once with the vocal separation. I don't want to compromise their quality again. So if I'm going to warp them, I'll just use the repitch and then carefully adjust the project tempo so that the vocal is in tune. So now that we have our vocal here, we can start processing it. First thing that you would want to do is give it a little bit of a high pass. Often these AI vocals will have some low frequency artifacts in them that we want to cut out. So there's this stuff down here. So we can high pass this pretty aggressively, just because for it to be as clean as possible, we really want to get rid of all that noise. So I'm going to bring it up until it's just barely starting to cut out some of the fundamental of the voice. That's already sounding a little bit better. And then next I'm going to find the most important tonal spot of the vocal. In my experience working with vocals, that's usually around 2 or 3K. So I'll just use a little boost here until I find a spot that makes the vocal sound a little bit clearer. This is also the area where the vocals usually stick out most in the mix, so it'll be the area that then usually has some of the cleanest sound to it. So we would want to kind of lean into this area and then duck down some of the others. And then a lot of the very high frequencies are masked pretty heavily in the source track by the drums and the effects. So we can do a little bit of a low pass. We don't want to cut out too much, but a lot of the stuff up there is just kind of noisy, low quality artifacts. So even just with that, it was sounding a little bit better. Just because we're focusing on the parts of the vocal that are the cleanest and the highest quality, and then cutting out the areas that are more or less useless noise. Then a really important step next is to add in some saturation and some clipping. Through the vocal separation, we lose a lot of the higher frequencies because the sheer amount of information in the higher frequencies is very difficult for the vocal separator to process. So we lose a lot of that, but we can restore some of that tone with some saturation. And what that'll do is that'll do two things. Number one, it'll bring out some more high frequencies in the tone, which is good, but also creating harmonics of the lower frequencies in the vocal. So harmonics from these lower frequencies here around the fundamental. So introducing harmonics of those will help to cover up some of the noisy lower quality artifacts. So it can just make the vocal sound a little bit cleaner, even though it's getting more distorted. So we'd probably want to use pretty gentle distortion, so the soft sine mode will be great for this.
Say you wanna feel.
Let's just bump this up to, I don't know, see 9 dB, and then take -9 on the output.
Say you wanna feel my love. You say you wanna know me love. You say you wanna feel my touch. You say you wanna kiss.
So now that we have the distortion, we can dial in the EQ a little bit further. I think that there are a few too many of those lower frequencies, so I'm going to just increase this high pass a little more.
Say you wanna feel my love. You say you wanna know me love.
I think that sounds about good. This next step is optional, but using a resonance suppressor like Waves, Curves, or Soothe can be very useful here. Just because as the frequencies are removed through the vocal separation, it's not perfect, and so you get some of the frequencies will kind of pop out and sound kind of resonant, so just using this can help smooth it out a lot.
Say you wanna feel my love. You say you wanna know me love. You say you wanna.
So you can see that it's just ducking down the most dominant frequencies, and that gives it kind of a smoother, rounder tone. Then the next step was just adding some spatial effects to help cover up the lack of quality in the vocal. So for this, just reverb is always a solid choice. So I'll just dial in a little vocal reverb, go with a pretty long decay, but a lower dry wet.
Say you wanna feel my love. You say you wanna know me love. You say you wanna feel my touch. You say you wanna kiss my lips. You say you wanna feel. Say you want.
Then let's listen to how that would sound in an entire mix. So I'll go over to this track that is underneath a little loop that I have going.
You say you wanna feel my touch. You say you wanna kiss my lips. You say you wanna feel my love. You say you wanna know me love.
And that sounds pretty close to how you would expect the original vocal to sound, but let's see how that was before I did any processing.
You say you wanna feel my touch. You say you wanna kiss my lips. You say you wanna feel my love. You say you wanna know love.
So it just sounds a bit more focused and cleaner after the processing. Now let's see the before and after right here.
Say you wanna feel my love. You say
I'll turn off all this processing.
You say you wanna feel my touch. You say you wanna kiss my lips. You say you wanna feel.
So yeah, there you have it. That's just some fast ways that you can clean up AI separated vocals and make your remix sound cleaner.